Well, hello everybody, this is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 222. So glad you could join me. Today's guest, Bob Hicok, is here. We're all really excited for that. He'll be here with us in about 5 minutes, but before we get in, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do this because we love poetry, and I know you do too, so please do click the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed. Ring the bell for notifications. Leave reviews on iTunes or Spotify. Tell your friends that this is a great episode. Post it on social media tomorrow. If you're watching after the fact, you can do that too. Anything you can do to help spread poetry around the internet would be greatly appreciated. It's really always helpful. That's how people hear about shows and they get to watch more, and you can stream this so many places. It's really nice to know about. So do share that with your friends if you're poetry lovers, and your friends are too. Now, Dante Stefano is supposed to be here. I'm not sure where he is. We're going to take a look at his poem to start out. We always start out with the Poets Respond poem. And Dante, of course, was the guest on Rattlecast, I don't know, it was around 212 maybe, or 208, something like that, in August. So look back at his episode for that. This poem that he has this week, we'll go to it right now. This poem is after reading that Merriam-Webster's 2023 word of the year is authenticity. And so a little reverie on that. Really interesting that is the word of the year. I'll read his note first, then we'll read the poem. So about this, Dante says, often lately, I've been teaching and reading and thinking about generative AI. Despite all I've read about Sam Altman, ChatGPT, etc., it's hard for me to imagine how this technology will transform our world. Reading the article about Merriam-Webster's Word of the Year further confirmed how enmeshed we are in this transformation already. Authenticity is a fraught term in poetry anyway, so I think this poem wandered into some of the fraughtness and complexity that comes with the terrain of lyric saying. For me, this is less a poem about AI than it is a poem about the ancient technology of poetic utterance in all its mystery. The word riz that I use at the end of the poem is an internet neologism added to Merriam-Webster this year, meaning romantic charm or appeal. And I'd never heard of that, even with, I have a 13-year-old daughter, so you'd think I'd hear all of the internet slang through her. I hadn't heard that one yet either, so I get to learn a word through this poem too. Here's Dante Stefano reading after reading that Merriam-Webster's 2023 word of the year is authenticity. Here we go.
After reading that Merriam-Webster's 2023 word of the year is authentic. I wonder about the future poems I will read, generated by AI, the imperceptibly pixelated tulips pushing through the rich soil in them, the deepfake MFA bios attached to them like deflated orange balloons, the shining metaphors crowing from them as I open the app of my eyelids and scroll lithely from stanza to stanza. I wonder if I'll be able to notice in their red wheelbarrows full of roses how a chatbot has demasked every stem. I found the poem I'm writing now, tucked in the galley of a tiny schooner, circumnavigating the four chambers of my heart. It was wedged under a cask of lime juice. It was written in the scrawl of a mad captain hell-bent on shipwreck or treasure or unspecified glory. It was found, it was wedged, it was written to explain a flower growing in me, a blue bonnet sprouting from my boot print, gently stretching skyward to touch the stars. But like all poems we humans fashion, from want and need and yes and must and what, it ended up saying something else beyond the arc of unsaying, something fevered and cut, rizzed up against the scurvy dark.
Yeah, rizzed up against the scurvy dark. Great last line there. That was Dante Stefano, his poem from the Poem of the Day on Sunday from Poets Respond. I'm not sure where Dante is, but thanks so much for sharing that, Dante. Always a pleasure. And do check out that episode from August. A wonderful poet and teacher, Dante Stefano. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, of course, Bob Hicok. So sit tight, and I'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. Like I said, today's guest is Bob Hicok, one of my personal favorite poets, maybe my very absolute favorite poet, actually. It's always a pleasure to have him here. Bob Hicok's 10th collection, Water Look Away, is right here. Was published by Copper Canyon Press this year. A 2-time finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award and recipient of the Bobbitt Prize from the Library of Congress. He's also been awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship, 2 National Endowment for the Arts of Poetry Fellowships, and 8 Pushcart Prizes, and his poems have been selected for inclusion in 9 volumes of the Best American Poetry. He teaches at Virginia Tech, and here he is, Bob Hicok. Hey, Bob, how you doing today?
How are you?
I'm great. It's great to have you back. I know you don't do a whole lot of readings and interviews. I was looking for some more recent stuff. You mentioned on the last episode, and I should have said that too, you were a guest on Rattlecast number 19, almost exactly 4 years ago. So if anybody wants to look back at that episode, I can't believe 4 years has gone by since then.
No.
But we were fresh off the, we had just started doing these shows. You were one of the early guests. We didn't even have dual cameras, so you couldn't see me as you were talking. But now you can, even though it's a very washed out camera image. But it's great to have you, and I really appreciate you coming on and doing this, even though you don't do many readings and events these days.
Sure. Happy to be here. Although now while you were discussing the last poem, the poem, response poem, mm-hmm. A word came to mind that rhymes with Riz, and I hope that's not part of the origin of the word Riz.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that, and I think you
I had not either. I had seen that a number of times during the week, and it's only while you're talking that unfortunate rhyme occurred to me.
You know, it's a YouTube star that they coined that term, and so I think I have a hunch that you might be right about the origin of that word.
Yeah.
Well, let's hear a poem. And in typical Bob Hicok fashion, you don't want to read poems from Water Look Away, which you didn't do last time either, if you remember right. Hold Me was the last book, and you read poems from Red Rover on the last Rattlecast. This time, you just came out with Water Look Away, but you want to read newer poems again. Do you want to start out with a poem just so we can get a sense of what you're doing, and we'd love to hear it?
Sure. This poem is called Yes, Please. Our cat with no eyes has urinary cystitis and drools and pees all over and can't or won't tell us when we should kill him. Perhaps my sudden desire for chocolate milk is meant to offset wondering how my aging parents are like or unlike our cat. But no matter what, I've yet to steal a car or boat or dirigible. So how can I claim to be living life to the fullest? And if one keeps a to-do list, shouldn't one of the items be to write a to-don't list? To don't get older, to don't lose patience with a yowling cat, to don't get stuck in a roundabout, even though life is a circle, mostly because life as a dodecahedron is too hard to spell. When I wake and pull up a chair to the bar of the morning, I usually ask for the usual, another chance to be part of something wonderful. Baking bread, watching ants, thinking tradition is why a cat with no eyes still covers where his eyes were with his paws while he sleeps. To don't hate anyone, to don't not plant a million trees, to don't bury my parents without kissing them on the lips, to taste death, to taste life, to know the difference.
Yeah, and that was Bob Hicok. Yes, Please, another new poem. And always great to hear those. I feel like I have, and I should say, to make everybody jealous, Bob sent me a packet of like 25 poems he might read. So I feel like I have a little mini chapbook to preview what might be coming. I can imagine what that new book might be like. But let's talk a little bit, because this is the book that Copper Canyon sent me, Water Look Away. I'll hold it up here where we can actually see. A beautiful small book by Bob Hicok. It's really slight and concise, and different in the style, from the style that we usually see from you. It's a lot shorter poems. There's a narrative theme running through, so it's novelistic in its arc, and a lot of experimentation. There's certain poems, for example, don't have a certain letter of the alphabet. There's things like that going on that you don't usually see from your work, which is usually a lot of like performed stream of consciousness is kind of how it is. Like you dive into a subject and you get to sort of live inside the mind of Bob Hicok for a little bit with your poems. This seemed more planned out and a different way of writing. So how did this book come to be, and what was your experience with it? Why write it?
That book was a lot of fun to write and a real surprise. The poems, as they appear in the book, that's the sequence they were written in. I didn't write anything else. I started writing that and finished it. And the first poem really kind of set the tone. And it was kind of an iteration of something that I think probably goes on for all writers, that some nth instance of what we tend to do, which I think for most of us tends to be kind of repetitive, every now and then there's a poem that's very different. And I think a lot of us, if we think the poems work, end up cherishing these poems. The first poem I wrote was different, but it also opened me up, I think, to a number of kind of big things that had been kicking around in my head, in my life, mostly under the surface. But that poem kind of opened me up to these things, including the topic of suicide. I am a survived suicide. And that, among other things, opened up. And I found myself writing through a couple characters and basically, like you said, creating a narrative that ended up being really interesting to me. But it wasn't planned out. It was, the way it's similar to how I write is it was very much day to day. I didn't know what I was going to do on any given day. But the tone remained the same and the connections built from day to day as I kind of told this story in a very weird kind of order. Because I mean, the book begins with a death, with a suicide, which probably wasn't the smartest way to begin a narrative. But I didn't know where I was headed with that first poem.
Yeah, just so people know, the poem starts out, "Welcome home" is a poem he's talking about, and then in the basement, an extension cord passed through a hole he'd bored, and it goes on like that with these short sentences, moving through in a really shorter poem than we're used to seeing from you, and then and it moves from there. So basically, this is sort of different than I imagined it might be. I imagined that maybe you wanted to try something different, and so you thought of having a narrative, but basically you took the poem and just ran with that poem and let that poem go.
Yeah, I had something, a kind of smaller version of this happened. I forget which book. There's a book I have where, as part of it, I have a number of 15-line poems, and I happened to write a 15-line poem, and I really liked the concision. I liked how it pushed me in a more lyrical direction. So I kept writing those every now and then. This had elements of that, but was far more of itself. And I don't know that I'll ever have an experience like this, but it was really enjoyable to get kind of taken up into something that I've heard novelists talk about, just how the novel consumes their lives. This had that impact on me to some extent. But there was still the surprise of how I normally write. I don't think about writing when I'm done writing. And with this one, I didn't either. I didn't think about, okay, the next poem should do this or that. I would just kind of show up and it's like, okay, it was almost like I was adding parts to the bodies, to the lives of these people every day.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So you mentioned being a survivor of suicide. How much of this was personal, if you don't mind me asking? And how much was fictionalized? Is there a way you can answer that?
It's 50-50. The major events, I mean, again, suicide in my life. A friend of mine, suicide impacted his life. A sense of loss. Some of the things that go on between the characters either are things I went through or people I'm close to went through. I also came to realize that even though the situations in the book are different from ones I've been through, in a lot of ways, the losses that the people in the book are dealing with are versions of losses that I've dealt with or watched other people deal with. It's just, I'm kind of touching on those things through lives that are made up.
Yeah, yeah. So sort of fictionalized characters looking through the emotions and sort of exploring that process.
Yeah.
And were you writing other poems in between them, or did these come out like in succession too?
No, it's however many poems there are, that's how many days it took to do this. And there was, I'm definitely in the first word, best word camp. Although there are huge parts of that are absolutely bullshit. The poems, basically the way they are in the book is the way they came out. So it was a really concentrated event.
Yeah.
And then there was something about the last poem. It's like, okay, it's done.
Wow.
And the next day I moved on to something else.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. I mean, it's the way that the subconscious is speaking through poetry. Like as poets, what we're really doing is training ourselves to sort of be open to the symbolic way of thinking of our subconscious. And then it comes out and we have no idea what we're even writing about or why, but it's something that like really our right brain wanted to communicate with our left brain. I think, it's something that that symbolic, holistic understanding of the world knew that, but couldn't articulate in a way that we could sort of embody and understand completely. And then the artist comes through and is expert at making that come to life. And that's what art really is, I think. So really great testament to that.
I really like the use of the word training in that context.
Yeah.
It brings to mind that the most effective way I've been able to speak of writing over the years is to liken it to athletics. People training themselves to do something that is on the surface unvariant. If a layup is what it is, but in an actual game, you have people who are trying to stop you from doing that. So if you have to think about how you do that, if that action is conscious, you're not going to be able to improvise on it. The actions, the way writing is in us has to be deep, and we have to get it in there by writing a lot. But in the actual act of writing a poem, it's highly performative.
What have you done? What do you do to get into that space? Because I think you might be the best at entering that space. I mean,
Wake up.
It sounded like you said that this book was written basically in like a month or however many poems there are, one poem a day, and the whole collection is done. And it really, I mean, your poems seem to come out like that. Like there's these whole poems that emerge from that process. What do you do to get into the right space? Is it just a matter of having sat down every day and so you're ready, like your subconscious knows like this is where I have to come out. And so it's like, yeah.
Let's do the math. I'm 63. I've been doing this pretty much every day for 40 years. So what is that? 12,000 plus times I have sat down and done this. I used to be good at math. I don't know if that math is incorrect. 4 times 300, 1,200 out of 10. So 14, 15,000, however many times, pretty much it. I don't take many days off. So it would be harder for me not to get in that mindset because it's what my body is used to doing every day. I tend to wake up around 5, get up, go write. And like I said, that's it. I do not think about it the rest of the day.
And how long do you spend with that writing?
Usually I come down about 7 or 7:30. I had to learn to write quickly because I was working a full-time job and I really wanted to write. And what I realized is I felt like shit if I didn't complete a poem. It felt as if I didn't write. So I learned to finish. If I sat down to write, I was going to finish. Good or bad, it just finished the damn thing. And I also remembered hearing something John Lennon said about finishing. And that when you come back to something a second time, your mind, your life has often changed. And it can be really hard to get back to the feeling you had initially. Yeah. And I found that to be true for me. For others, this approach would destroy them. The daily writing would destroy them. And we're different animals. A friend of mine can only write when he feels like he has no choice. And if he tried to do what I do, it would kill him. And if I tried to do what he does, I would probably kill him. So there's enough death.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's hear. I want to keep some poems coming. I want to talk more, but let's do another poem first.
This is called Wanted to, Didn't Run. I've imagined a rainbow being raped without knowing what evil I'm really afraid of. Let's say all of it. Let's say every person is an iceberg, with most of who they are or what they want obscured from view, and the ship that runs into that iceberg, and the cries of people trying not to drown, and the unlistening stars. Now let's consider a different notion to sing against this theory. Every person is a piano being tuned by a deaf woman who hears with her fingers, who loves the honesty of wood, who gives half her bologna sandwich to her dog. It's not that I love you, since we don't know each other, I say to myself every day in the mirror, but I want to love you. I can't remember at what age I realized the jobs I was most qualified for. Introverted fuck-up, metaphorical thumbsucker, didn't exist. But when I moved on to really good napkin folder and player of drums underwater, I started to see myself as a viable weather system or a coordinated thrashing of grass by wind. Do you know the sound of hundreds of birds taking off at the same time, like the skies drawing in air after holding its breath for a century? Neither do I, but I'm determined to be that sound.
Yeah, another great new poem by Bob Hicok. Wanted to, didn't run. Bob, you mentioned, first word, best word being, partially bullshit. What is the bullshit part of that? And what is the valid part?
I'll begin by, I guess, going back. Part of why I said what I did toward the end of my last comments is that when we talk about how we write or talk about anything about us, it can be easy for people to think you're trying to advocate for them or saying, this is how people should be. What I found is we really kind of fall into groups. And those of us who write the way I do, who are basically in the first word, best word camp, who I actually prefer to think of it really as a performance, that you do this often enough. And I've come to believe in this importance of completing a poem in one sitting. So it is kind of like a performance. It's going to live in that moment, but most of these will be crap. Most of what I write is crap. So most of it will be thrown out and should be thrown out. You stick with first word, best word, the danger is that you have no critical apparatus, that you're not being critical of your work. And that approach taken to an extreme could lead to that point. I know very few people who apply it that way. I think people who write like I write, what you tend to do is you throw out a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also, one thing that I've enjoyed of late, and it could just be a feature of age, I've come to like not completing poems. Taking, like I wrote most of a poem today and I stopped before the end. I've kind of come to like having a different experience, having to look at the poem over a longer period of time. So I'll come back to it tomorrow, and if I still like it, I'll work on the end and potentially change it in ways that I wouldn't have in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the approach is still the same, but part accidentally, part intentionally, I'm trying to experience something different and seeing what that does to my poems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, more part of the artistic play. When you, I think of it as probably revising, mid-process. Like it's like sort of the revision is part of the creation. So as you go, what level of, magnification do you do that on? Is it usually by the line, sort of, once you get a line down, is that going to be the line? Do you go back and that 2.5 hour sitting and change like the title and change the first line and cut things like that? Or do you just sort of get the momentum of it and then sort of keep catching that wave?
I'll go back to an earlier comment of mine. The limitation I faced with time, having to work a full-time job, and this was the design work I used to do, was the standard number of hours was 56 hours a week. Plus I had an hour commute either way. So I didn't have much time to write. What evolved for me pretty quickly was not advancing beyond that which I was happy with. And largely I've maintained that approach to this day. So I'll just see what shows up and then wait for something interesting and then write 2-3 lines and then go back and read it. If I don't like it, do whatever I need to do to either decide this is no good, I'm going to go in another direction, or get that where I want it to be, and then I push off from that. So by the time a poem is finished, I've read through parts of it potentially hundreds of times, even in a brief period of time. So write a little, read, write a little, read, write a little, read. So I sometimes think of it almost like trying to straighten out a crumpled piece of paper. There's a process of continual smoothing that's going on, and decisions being made, sometimes dramatic. I could find I really need to change something at the top when I'm at the end. But usually the work is being done as I go. So by the time I get to the end, I've shaped something that I believe in that moment. And that's a big part of it.
Yeah, in that moment.
May not believe in it in another moment, but in that moment, I believe in it.
Well, let's hear another poem. Keep them coming. What's next?
This is called At the Reception. Everyone else had gone to dance around a man and woman lifted on chairs into the sky of the future of their love. When he pushed away his plate, rolled up his white sleeve, showed me the number on his arm and rubbed it as if asking it to grant him 3 wishes. I imagine he would have been tempted in the camp to mourn all of the ashes the wind carried on its shoulders across Poland, not knowing which were his mother, father, sister, had he not been so busy dying of hunger. I wanted to listen to the locomotive of his heart, to go to sleep on the pillow of his breath, and should have kissed him on the lips like a lover of life, or at least pulled a rose out of my ear to show him the magic of his survival had endured. But I think he would have said it wasn't magic, it was luck, that evil was so busy back then it couldn't get around to all the Jews, no matter how hard it tried. As I watched him shuffle away, I wondered what normal was for him, for anyone who'd seen human beings become bored with cruelty in that factory of death. Later, I saw him dancing with his cane since he couldn't dance with the ashes of his wife. He'd shown me her picture. She looked the way most people look in photos, plain, happy, alive.
And that was Bob Hicok again with At the Reception, another newer poem. So fun getting to look at forthcoming poems that haven't been out yet from Bob Hicok. But we mentioned, I was looking through our last conversation 4 years ago on Rattlecast 19, and one of the things we didn't mention that we usually talk about is your background. And we already discussed, you were working a full-time, more than full-time job as a tool and die designer. As your poetry career started to take off. Can you explain a little bit about what work you were doing? Does that your process there relate to the way you construct poems now? Is there some kind of connection that you can see, or is it something that you just happen to be doing, and then poetry is something else you happen to be doing, and one kind of took off that you loved, and that's the story?
The work I did, so I designed automotive dies, which are large steel objects that stamp out car parts. Mm-hmm. The stuff I did was mostly kind of big parts, doors, hoods, that sort of thing. And I did that for about 20 years. The actual work, if I showed you what I did, it would hurt your eyes. Lines on top of lines, circles, other shapes that are really hard to understand if you're not really used to looking at these drawings. But the way I think it's similar, what I've come to realize over time, is I like making stuff. That's the common theme for me. That was kind of like writing. You would begin, it was different in that you knew what the end product had to be. Mm-hmm. It's not like Ford Motor was going to say, well, you tell us what our, left side door is going to look like on the 1992 Mustang. But how you got there was in many ways up to you. So you would begin with blank, in this case, sheets of Mylar, and later on a blank computer screen. And the process of constructing things, I've come to realize, just thrills me no end. It's what I like about writing poems. It's what I've come to like about working on our house. Mm-hmm. I've had to learn, and I've happily learned a lot about working on houses. And I'm kind of a sucker for any kind of creation. Mm-hmm. That to me would be the through line with that work.
Yeah, well, it makes perfect sense. The word poetry comes from to make. Poetry are makers, and so so that really fits. How did you end up in that job? Was that something? Did you have an inkling that you wanted to be a writer before that, or how did that come?
Writing, I knew about. I was writing by that point, but I didn't know about publication. I didn't know about MFA programs, all that whole world at that time. I went to an experimental university place called William James College, which was part of what's now Grand Valley State University in Michigan. And I finished up, and as I was finishing up, the college was reorganized, and they said, well, you have to take things like algebra, which I did in 6th grade, and I really didn't want to take algebra. I had a liberal arts degree, or should have had. Mm-hmm. So I'm finishing up, and I said, okay, I'll take care of these requirements when I'm in graduate school. And the graduate school I got into was for library science. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and someone suggested library science. So I got accepted at University of Michigan's library science program. Did a semester there, realized I didn't want to have anything to do with library science. So I dropped that. I never finished my degree, and I needed a job. And I was mowing lawns, doing a lot of the work, and the guy wouldn't give me a raise, so I got pissed. And my dad arranged a job at a design company for what was called a runner. I thought I would just do this for the summer. I would make blueprints. I would drive and pick up drawings that they needed dropped off, or pick up drawings that they needed brought back. And it turned out I had a knack for the work. And that ended up being my career for, as I said, 20 years.
Yeah.
I've tended to find what I want to do by trying stuff. I think many of us are more knock around than we're kind of collectively comfortable admitting. It's something that I worry about with students. There's so much pressure to know what they want to do. And many of us kind of bump into things and it's like, well, I didn't like that, so I'll try this, and hopefully stumble on things that we like.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's so true. I mean, that you have no idea. I had no idea I'd be doing this. This is the last thing in the world I thought I'd be doing is, interviewing a poet for a show. And then here you are. You just kind of bump into things. And that's all of what chemistry is and what life comes from, too. Every biology is just things bumping into each other. So,
yeah. What did you think you would be doing?
Oh, I was a molecular biology major. I was working in an RNA. I was trying to synthesize, chemicals or pharmaceuticals was what I thought would be really useful. I mean, it seemed like mRNA stuff was the future. So I worked in an mRNA lab way back in 2000, 2002, 2003, 2004. Yeah. Wow. And then I decided I didn't like it. It was too narrow and too focused, and I didn't have the love of it that everybody else did. So I kind of moved on to what was more interesting, which was at first it was working at a group home for mentally ill adults. I felt like that was really rewarding. And then, but I liked poetry and writing too. And then I ended up here after being offered this job. So it just kind of came out of nowhere. I never would have thought it. In fact, my dad used to make fun of me. He'd call me the poet because I like to write poems. I'm like, no way, Dad, that's ridiculous. And then here I am. So he was right.
Wow, I like that.
Well, let's hear another poem, and then I should say, if anybody has any questions for Bob, we already have at least one good question in. If you have any questions for Bob, leave them in the chat windows either on Facebook or YouTube, and I'll pass along some questions too. We have a couple good questions both, so we'll do that. But let's hear another poem, Bob.
Called Progress in the Middle Ages. The king kept a book of lists. Rivers I own, heads I've had removed. Inspiring things for the queen to say while I am on top of her trying to produce an heir. But his favorite was reasons not to be king. And of the reasons not to be king, it would be nice to think people love me for who I am was the saddest. His dog, though, loved everything about him. The sound of his voice, the smell of his knees, the way the king pet his head after he'd killed a rabbit. The king crossed off, your grunts are the poems the muses would write if they had but an ounce of your grace, my grace, and drew a cloud that started to rain. When he looked at the list the next day, there was a lake below where the cloud had been, and a man rowing a boat across the lake. Strangely happy to be out of control, to have no dominion over the lake or the man. He called his dog and they went for a walk, one wagging on the outside, one on the inside. Finally, he told the queen, please say whatever you want to say. A few days after their son was born, the king wrote the briefest of his lists, ways to be happy while wearing a crown. Take the crown off and set it on a table beside a candle or a spoon.
Yeah, and that was Progress in the Middle Ages by Bob Hicok. So let me see. We have some questions from the audience. Monica Dobos, a really good follow-up question. She says, if you had all the time in the world at your hand, would you be as creative? Or do you think there's something about coercion, the lack of time, that sparks our imagination?
Yes. Thank you for saying I'm creative. I would bait you on that anywhere, anytime. I absolutely think there's something to that. There've been maybe not the best thing to say. When I started teaching, I had more time. Mm-hmm. If you are fortunate to get one of these nice teaching jobs, the demands on your time are simply not what they are for most of us. It didn't really change anything, but I also didn't expand the time I chose to write, which was something that indicated to me I really like or need that compression. And I've also noticed in periods when I've really been stretched for time, I think I've done some of my most interesting work. And I think there is something about pressure. When it's pressure doing something you want, when it's pressure doing something you don't want to do, I think all kinds of damage can be done to you and others. But when it's something you want to do, that desire can pull us through. And it's like, well, I have less time, so I'm just going to be even quicker in these decisions because I still want the end result.
Yeah, there's something. Do you think to the way that it is, the subconscious speaking? Do you think that if you're really busy, you don't have as much time to just internally process your emotions? Like you don't know what's going on or what connections you make throughout the day, and you're focused on so many other tasks that there's sort of a deficit of the kind of thinking that poetry does.
Yes, I think that is part of it, and another part of it is if you do this often, you come to understand, again, unconsciously, that this is where I take care of my shit. So that's another reason you look forward to it. That you don't even have to tell yourself this is going on, but I absolutely know it's the case for me. That things I don't attend to or don't have time to attend to, I will hear. And also, I like the way I attend to my stuff here. And one thing that tells me that is if I write, I can deal with a lot of crap in the day, and it, in many ways, doesn't bother me. If I can't write, and it usually takes only a day, or I don't like what I've written, it doesn't take that long before, in a sense, shit starts backing up, and it will get in my day in a way that I don't like.
Well, let's do another poem and then keep talking.
This is called True Story. Can't escape the possibility I was meant to own a Zamboni, but got stuck with 3 can openers instead. Or that I should have kissed your knees last night when you got home from being with your friend who just had her cat killed. I know I'm supposed to write put to sleep, but can she wake her up now? No. And it was kind of you to rush over right after work, and you deserved praise in some form, and your knees don't get enough attention, I guess I'm saying. Where would we have gone on the Zamboni? Dunno. But how is certain. Slowly. Here's a headline you never have to worry about. 3 Canadians killed in Zamboni drag racing accident. I'd buy a newspaper to tell the world how much I love you. Tons, gigobs. And how many cats have we cried over so far? 4. And 1 dog, and soon we'll start adding parents to that list. Then one of us will look at empty chairs around the house and hate them. So knees, elbows, hair, and of course the more famous bits. I kiss thee in life and in poems, which are not life, more like a flashlight turned on in a black hole. Gigobs is a lot. Gigobs squared is more accurate. But is amount really the correct measure of love? I love you greenly, gymnastically, variously, and stratovariously. I love you with my heart shadow and my brain fog and my suitcase packing skills. The suitcase I'm packing for when you go to the next room and I have to follow. Poor kitty, poor friend, poor us. We who have to deal with mortality using a limited toolkit. There's crying, drinking, toking, injecting, breaking dishes and popsicle sticks, and loving longer and softer those who remain. How long ago did there cease to be a time I can remember being without you? 1897, I think, the year the jumping jack was invented, the year levitating was added to the Olympics, the year I first dreamed I was alive and saw you coming around the corner and thought, so this is the famous happiness I've heard so much about.
And that was another poem by Bob Hicok, True Story. Thanks for sharing that, Bob. I should say, please do, if you're enjoying this conversation and reading, please do click the like button. It's good to remind people in the middle. There's dozens or 50-something people just on YouTube alone watching right now. Only 18 likes, so click the like button if you haven't yet. That really helps these poems be recommended to other people, and that's what we want to do, is have more people listening to great poetry. On Facebook too, and share it. It's a one-click button there. Anything you do really helps. So, Bob, you mentioned teaching, and that sort of the lucky few who get to do that. It used to be a more easy thing to get into. To crack that. There were so many growing programs, new opportunities. In the 80s and 90s, and now those things are drying up. Programs are closing. And there's this huge, massive amount of students that have graduated with MFAs and stuff. So it's a really difficult thing to try to pursue because the odds of getting some kind of good academic job are lower and lower every year. Do you find, first of all, did you find that when you got to that point where you could teach and just have that be the way you earn income, was it sort of what it was cracked up to be? What do you really enjoy teaching? And then, answer that first. I'm curious about that.
My situation is different in that it was not a dream. I think because I came to publishing late, both my awareness of it and then my participation in it. And because I didn't go through an MFA at the point most people do. I ended up getting a low residency MFA because by the time I decided I wanted to teach, I was told, you'll need the degree to get the job. Mm-hmm. And I actually got the job at Virginia Tech while I was getting that degree. I decided to finish, and I'm glad I did. But because of kind of the weird order of things for me, I had not been dreaming of a teaching gig. For years, I thought it would simply not be an option for me because I didn't have the degree. And I would hear people talk about it, but it was not really something I thought of. So I came to it without many expectations. I think the most surprising thing about academia to me, and this is not particular to MFA programs, is the degree of specialization. And the extent to which that kind of not pushes faculty away from each other so much as doesn't really allow them to come together. People are so focused reasonably on their careers, on their research, on their writing. And universities themselves don't have a lot of ways that they bring faculty together. Mm-hmm. So intellectually, these ended up being lonelier places than I had imagined for many years. Mm-hmm. This is separate from any thought of teaching. I imagine universities to be places where folks who work there, sat around and talked about ideas. And while that absolutely can go on, there's not a lot of it in my experience. Mm-hmm. I've liked teaching. I'm like a lot of people, though, if I'm honest, teaching was not something I sought out. Mm-hmm. And one of the stranger things about universities is that you are rewarded for the success of your research. For a poet, that would be publishing. Teaching is often a secondary concern. And that, too, surprised me. I didn't realize that was kind of the foundation of these places. Mm-hmm. I don't like workshops. The teaching I like best is actually one-on-one.
Oh, yeah.
I've come to believe that the workshop model is not really the way to go about this, that it's primarily an economic model that allows people to, pay someone like me and get enough folks who are paying tuition in front of them that the trade-off economically works.
Mm-hmm.
But this really should be like any craft, an apprenticeship.
Mm-hmm.
But there's not the economic wherewithal to handle it that way.
Yeah, I mean, it functions like a pyramid scheme. It's like the people at the bottom of the pyramid pay the people at the top, and if you get to the top, you get paid, and if not, you don't. But when I bring that up, there's the corollary that what other option is there? Like, would you rather not have there be programs, or you're not where you can, meet and get to know a poet like Bob Hicok and get his advice on poetry and writing? So, yeah.
I've been really honest with undergrads who say they're interested in the programs. Mm-hmm. First thing I ask them, I say, do you come from money? And no one so far has said they come from money. Because I was waiting for someone to say yes. I said, great, you don't need to worry about it. Go get an MFA. But I tell people, you should expect you're going to be flipping burgers on the other end of this, mm-hmm. that there is no job waiting for you. And this has been the case for me all the way along. And that if you feel you can teach yourself to write, these may not be, MFA programs may not be right for you. But if you like the idea of hanging out with writers, and I tell them, I mean, primarily the students, but also the faculty for 2 or 3 years, this is kind of the only gig, kind of the only way to do it. But I don't think we've been collectively honest enough with each other about what is at the end of this process for most people. And it has pained me that we're not.
Yeah. I'm trying to find the question. I can say who asked, but somebody had asked, what was the best advice or what would you tell a student that seems like the most productive thing you can say as a teacher? Is there something that you find yourself sort of giving the same advice because it's helpful?
This will be disappointing because to me, it really is the only advice, right? Put your ass in the chair. And if you find you find you're not doing that, you're probably telling yourself something. Mm-hmm. Because this is like anything someone gets good at. This is something that takes iterations. It takes work. Mm-hmm. It takes repetition. And a lot of folks who, you can kind of tell the folks who really, one of the ways to tell someone who's kind of the real deal is they don't have to be pushed to write. You kind of have to hold them back. Mm-hmm. So it ends up being advice that maybe you don't need to give, but it's the only advice that has really made sense to me. Mm-hmm. That and the corollary is read.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And read. Right. And read.
So somebody else asked, I think it was Mary Torgrosa over on Facebook, what poets do you like to read lately? Are there a certain sort of type of poet or certain poets that jump out at you?
It changes over time, although there are some folks who are constant, like just looking down. The books that are folded open are the ones I'm interested in. Mm-hmm. And Frank O'Hara's Massive Collected, he's kind of a staple for mm-hmm. me. A book by Francesca Bell and a book by a guy, Burt Myers, who I had not heard of. The folks down in Houston have this, I forget the name of it, something masters, basically kind of forgotten masters. And Burt Myers, I think, is a California poet.
Yeah, I remember somebody really saying I should read him, and I can't remember who or when, but the name jumps out as something I was like, I'm going to look into that, and I haven't. And I'm sure Francesca would love to hear that you have her book open there. She's been a guest twice, too.
I like her poems.
Yeah, she's great. Yeah. And another poet who came to poetry late in life. I mean, you think there's, or not really poetry late in life, but, came to publishing and pursuing it seriously. She, sort of famously didn't graduate high school and started writing later. No. And I think that's one of the things that makes her poetry special. But do you think there's something to that? Like, would you advise people to go live something, go work in a different job for a while and then try an MFA maybe?
Yeah. Again, this is so complicated. If you've got your heart set on him, Godspeed, go. What we've lost, this kind of goes back to the specialization that I was talking about at universities. You can learn to do this on your own. This is not, people learn to do this for a very long time without being taught how to do it. And I don't say that as a way of attacking education or the MFA programs, but I think as a culture, we've bought into this idea a bit too much that to do something, you need someone to teach you. Mm-hmm. And I say that because one of the things that I think shows up with the people who come to this in a kind of what is now a kind of sideways manner, they tend to be different. Mm-hmm. And even just in kind of naked terms, in terms of success, being different will do you good. It's harder to be different or maintain that difference if you come to people at the wrong time and they start telling you what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think that may be the thing for people to give a lot of thought to if they are interested in an MFA program.
Yeah.
Just, am I fully formed enough that I can listen to what people say, but I can go, no, yeah, no, yes, no, you're crazy. You're absolutely right. And I didn't want to admit that, and do that kind of sifting. Mm-hmm. Because end of the day, you're the one who needs to decide they're your poems.
Yeah. Is that why you prefer the one-on-one teaching? Because it's sort of, you get to nurture that difference and that strangeness and without
you can
resistance.
Protect it. And I think it's also important for the discussion of a poem to be a conversation. And the basic structure of the workshop where someone sits and people talk to them, I understand why we do that, because a lot of times people want to defend their poems, which is stupid. But I want this to be a conversation because I want to know what is behind what's on the page. Why did this show up? Because why things showed up is actually more important when you're learning things than what showed up. Mm-hmm. And it's virtually impossible to have those conversations in a class.
Yeah.
Whereas one-on-one, I can be really honest about why I'm responding a certain way. And the other person could be really honest about what they had hoped would go on, what they intended, what they were thinking when they wrote something. So it takes time. It takes that give and take.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we have time for about 2 more poems, Bob. Do you want to read the second to last one you'll share?
Having had a little bit of enough. Perhaps we should stab an evil person and then go to a church or temple or mosque and ask one of the holy people we find there to excuse our behavior based on the idea that it was the knife's fault. Probably we should stare at clouds instead and tell each other which dead president or extinct species of beetle that one over there looks like. No, the other one. The other one. Reading the news these days makes me want to put my head under a lawnmower for the peace and quiet. Also, a bit of the suicide would be nice. Just a dab. I don't really want to die with my boots on. First, I'd have to buy some boots. And second, I'd have to go to the boot store to buy some boots. And third, I'd have to buy a horse to go with the boots. And I don't have enough room for my depression as it is, let alone my depression on top of a horse. Evil people doing evil things. Maybe what I meant to say is we should stab an evil person with the stuffed bear they were probably denied as a child. Whatever. We have to try something, don't we, to make this a better world? Not a badder world, not a bitter world, not a butter world, although I can see merits in all of those. A better world. And no, not a world where you can bet whenever you want on whatever you want, though we seem to be going down that road. Vegas will let you slap dough down on anything. even the when and how of the apocalypse, though not the why. There's no mystery to the why, because. And what would a better world look like? That's easy, different.
Yeah, that's Having Had a Little Bit of Enough by Bob Hicok. And there's a lot of existential anxiety, maybe you could call it, in your poems here and in Water Look Away. Do you think that's something that you've always felt that's coming to the surface more? Do you think that's a symptom of the modern era? Or do you think that, or is that just the natural state of humans? Like, we know that we will die, I mean, that's part of the thing about realizing we're naked or whatever in Genesis was trying to describe, that we're vulnerable to that. Do you think that there's something growing in you that has to do with that? Or or is that something that's always been there?
I think both. I think it has always been there. But these are special times. These are really difficult times to go through, economically, politically, in particular. So I think there's a heightened sense of kind of collective anxiety that I've found myself wanting to write about more often these days.
Mm-hmm. How do you lost my train of thought for a second. I was going to ask about. Well, I'll ask this question instead, because it was a question that interrupted my thought flow. And it was, given that your style of writing is so stream of conscious, like the free thought, first thought, best thought type, how do you improve at that process? What is the how does improvement happen? And would it be? I mean, my guess would be trying to find ways to not bore yourself. Is that what it would be? Trying to stay interested in what you're doing, as you get used to what you've already done.
Not boring myself is probably the primary driver of how it's largely, I think I'm largely trying to find and follow just what interests me. Mm-hmm. But I'll go back to something I touched on earlier, but the poems that pop up that are different. Part of changing, I think, is recognizing your limitations. One of the things that I hate about readings is when I look over my poems, I hate them. I cannot stand them. It took me so long to come up with a group of poems that I thought I could stomach long enough to do this. And I've realized over time, part of that is just a recognition of everything I can't do. Mm. There's a poem in front of me that I came across the other day called Teleology by a woman I'd not heard of, a young woman named Willie Lynn. And I really like this poem, and it's different from what I do. And I think looking for difference in what you do and following it and trying to change your work over time, the same way hopefully we're trying to change ourselves, is really important. And it's really hard to do because things that have taken a shape, you bend them out of that shape, they want to come back to that shape. So the Water Look Away would be an extreme example of how I've done that for myself. Mm-hmm. And I could point out in books and also in plenty of stuff that never made it into books, how I've tried to cultivate something that is different. So I think intentional change is a huge part of doing this. It's just the hardest thing any of us will ever do. Mm-hmm.
There's a good question here from Laura B. And I should add this to my list of sort of regular questions. It's a good one. She says, does writing bring you joy or rather ease pain?
Brings me joy.
Yeah.
Brings me joy. Yeah. Brings me joy.
And
that brings to mind the ease his pain from the baseball movie. But I don't know why. I'll never really understand why. I love writing.
Mm-hmm.
The process interests me far more than the result.
Yeah.
When I write, I feel immense. I feel I can do anything. As soon as I'm done with my own poems and anything else,
Mm-hmm.
that feeling goes away.
Yeah. Do you
And
ever?
it has to do, I think, with that disappearance that you hear musicians talk about a lot. They just kind of go away.
Mm-hmm.
The way that we become the process more than ourselves, I find is deeply meditative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that flow state, that dissolution of self that
Yeah,
athletes have. Speaking of athletes before,
yeah,
that's why you have to practice the free throws or the layups, is because you have to be in the flow state while playing, or else you're not going to play well. And
yeah.
the same thing for writing. Um, so we've been reading books from a forthcoming manuscript, I suppose. How does that work? The creation of a book. I mean, Water Look Away seems like it had a very clear beginning and end to start with. But how do you know when you have a book of poems? Is there some way that you see? Oh, I've been writing about this for a while now. I'm done, and that was a time when I was writing sort of with these concerns. Do you just like, oh, there's 40 poems I like? How does it go?
It's it's I think a feature of time and
Mm-hmm.
just the realization that a lot of poems have piled up, and then I start a process which I do not like, which does not bring me joy, of just sifting through them, coming up with what I think is a book, and then having that sit around the house and picking that up in odd moments
Mm-hmm.
and responding to it kind of when I don't think I'm going to be looking at it. So I can kind of experience the poems as if I don't know them. I find I'm much more honest if I look at something all of a sudden. It's like, okay, yeah, you actually don't like that poem, so it's got to go. But it's more a feature of time than anything. I don't, by and large, have project books. So
Hmm.
things pile up and I kind of want to move through the pile.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you look through? Are there any? You mentioned not liking poems after you've written them. Do you ever actually like a poem? Like, could you look back? I mean, Insomnia Diary is probably one of my all time favorite books. Do you look through a poem in there and you say, oh, I love that poem, or do you feel the same kind of way about them now that the moment's passed? And that was an old Bob, an old incarnation of this character, and I don't care for it anymore.
I basically don't open the I don't open the books. Although it's funny that you say that. I looked at that book a couple of months ago and I was kind of shocked that I opened it and I read a poem and I liked it. And I said, okay, I'm going to close the book and just
Well, maybe I was
let
thinking
that be an experience.
if you get far enough away, maybe it's a stranger, like the you
Yeah.
when you were 35 or 40 or whatever is not the same you now. And maybe you can have that distance and enjoy your own poems again.
No, I hope so. I've been thinking I should probably put together a selected, but the idea of going through the books and doing that
Yeah. Well, recruit somebody
is far
else.
more appealing to me to write new poems.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, recruit somebody else. They could do it for you. Well, I think we're out of time, Bob. So let's do one last poem to close it out.
Okay. This is a poem for and about Gerald Stern. It's called A Little Wave of My Hand Goodbye. This weird, spiky, prehistoric looking bug kept trying to sneak inside because it's getting cold and Gerald Stern has died and left a hole in romanticism that will never be filled. I remember him as uglier than a shoe run over by a car in the rain, and as beautiful as every tree with moonlight in its hair. I met him once in person and often in my hands holding books and turning pages. Will there be books 200 years from now? People? I gave the bug $1 and told it I'm jealous that it can fly, and found a picture of Stern and Jack Gilbert looking together and alive for what's left of forever in Pittsburgh, where steel once grew like apples once grew in every backyard when I was a child. You know the saying, Throw a rock and you'll hit a poet trying to lasso the wind. I remember him as hungrier than any man to love with a voice, part tuba, part velvet suit with the Garden of Eden in its lapel. If poetry is starlight clearing its throat, the harumph and guffaw of the light of time, someone should tell us. Someone did.
That's great. Great poem to end on too, Bob. A Little Wave of My Hand Goodbye by Bob Hicok. Perfect closing poem. Thanks so much for being a guest, Bob. It's just a great pleasure to have you on. And I'm glad, since you don't do this kind of stuff much, it's really an honor to have you here.
Well, thank you again, Tim, for having me, and for Rattle, for everything you do for Rattle and those of us who read it and enjoy it.
Well, thank you. Yep. Take care, Bob. Thanks. Appreciate it. It was Bob Hicok. And of course, his newest book is Water, Look Away. You can find that where all fine books are sold, including coppercanyonpress.org. Bob Hicok as well, and doesn't have any website, I don't think, as far as I know. He didn't last time anyway. He doesn't have any social media presence. He just writes poems, and then when the time has come that there are too many to stack, he publishes a book. So that's Bob. Water, Look Away is the newest one, though, and it is a great collection, really different from his other work. So concise compared to what you're used to. But thanks for Bob for being a guest tonight. Now we're going to go to our prompt lines. And, of course, the open lines have now become the prompt lines. It's been several months of that, so it should be known. Did I do this right yet? Oh, let me see. I have to fix this again. I keep forgetting did I update this now? So the, let's see, the prompt for this week was there we go. The prompt for this week was to write a poem addressing a pain from childhood that uses a refrain. And that was inspired by last week's guest Joshua Mensch's poems in his book, Because. And that is the prompt for this week. Now, how it works, if you'd like to join us, is first of all, email me your poem to promptlines at rattle.com. That way I can show the poem on screen like I was showing with Bob's poems as you read them. Submit one poem only, 2 pages max. That's the rule. If they're super, super short, like, haiku and things like that, feel free to fill up a whole page or whatever. But one poem only, 2 pages max, based on the prompt. These are the prompt lines. And then find the Zoom link, which I'm about to share on Facebook and YouTube. So watch for that link. And I will paste it in right now, and you can join us. Watch me rearrange the chairs a little bit behind the scenes. That's always fun. But if you would like to just listen and enjoy the poems that we have for our prompt lines, then sit tight right where you are, because you don't have to join. Don't join the Zoom. It's better to watch on YouTube or Facebook. But if you would like to share, please do join. And here we go. Let me get the link there. And I'll be right back, though, with more poetry. And we're back. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. So I'm having a little trouble logging into the Prompt Lines email address. So Katie is going to talk to you for a second about
the amazing interview we all just watched, which I enjoyed greatly. I thought it was fascinating, in particular, talking about Bob Hicok's process, which I was really interested in, with how prolific he is, and also the idea of, him writing more experimental poetry and, liking not being bored, which is important.
It is very important not to be bored.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see. That's what. So there was no.
I can keep talking about that interview all day.
Keep talking about the interview.
I'll keep talking about the interview. No, I also, I was really happy personally because it wasn't so far from how I feel about my own writing, with how I write really fast. And I was thinking about how I think I'm a much better writer after having kids, where I have no time to write and being like, this is your 30 minutes, make the most of it, lady. And then I just have to get in there and write, because that's my chance to write for the day. So
yeah, definitely.
Or the 20 minutes I had this morning for my own poem.
Yeah, you do cruise through the poems. You definitely do.
No, I had to. And when I did the thing where I write on plane rides, that really, and I get prompts where I have to write 10 poems in 2 hours, that really forces you, because you're not going to no-show a poem for your friend. So that helped me write faster too. And I tend to think, as you've said before, Tim, that the best poems tend to come out fast,
They definitely do. That's true.
Yeah. So if you're laboring through a poem, it's not the best sign. So I definitely didn't do that for my prompt poem this week that I wrote in about 10 minutes, and was kind of nervous to share for that reason too. It was a little less time. And I also wrote it on my phone, which I almost never do, because we've been a little busy this week.
Yeah, we have, moving to a new studio.
We are moving into, yeah, this is the last one in this one.
Okay, so email your poem instead, because for some reason, I don't know why, it's not letting me log in. I have the password and it just comes up with a blank screen. Will the open mic work? That's not working either. What is going on?
Well,
so this is, okay, let me try this.
Well, there's no shame in submittable.
There we go.
Wait, oh, yay.
I have no idea what was happening. Anyway, Now that we've had that exciting
I think people enjoy it.
seeing me panic again.
Aww.
I don't know what was going on, though. It made no sense. But anyway, so now we are ready for the prompt lines.
Yes.
And so let's start out. The prompt for this week was to, I'll put it on screen right here.
Okay.
It was to write a poem that addresses a pain from childhood and uses a refrain. So what did you come up with, Katie? Do you have can you read it off the screen?
I can read it off the
Okay.
screen. I'm wearing my contacts and I'm equipped to read something that is 2.5 feet in front of me.
Excellent.
Okay. All right. So this is technically an American sonnet, which, sometimes poems just come out 14 lines and we get to slap that label on them. And that's an example of this one.
Yes, we do.
Okay. After pain. I remember prodding my puffy eyes in the mirror, how crying made my blues turn green, how I was a toad stuck in the mud, wondering again why he had to come after me. I remember climbing up trees to look down instead of be looked down on, the sap that still clings to my hair. I remember almost jumping to anywhere that wasn't there.
Great last line, as always, Katie. After Pain by Kitty Dozier,
Thank
our
you.
prompt poems editor. So makes up a prompt and then writes one herself every week. And now mine, I thought, I didn't realize, okay, I'm going to be honest. I forgot that the refrain was I started to write a poem because the childhood pain reminded me of this little anecdote.
Okay.
And I started to write a poem, and then I remembered there had to be a refrain halfway through where I already decided it was going to be a hyben. And so,
the same thing. You're not even joking.
Really?
I went for a hyben and was like, oh, how do I work the refrain into a hyben? Never mind.
I just went with it.
Oh,
so this
I
is
like
a hyben with a refrain. So here we go. This is House of Straw. 2 boys in a classroom, bored and a poke in a back with a pencil. Stop. The teacher at the blackboard, green sea, little waves of chalk from the sponge used to clean it, a poke in the back with a pencil. Stop. The problem, a road trip, car X and car Y, the miles per gallon and the distance between, a poke in the back with a pencil. If you poke me one more time, I'll make you sorry. There's the answer in miles, but around and around the car's circle, a Celtic knot carved in the wood of the desk, metallic tint to the lead, and a poke in the back with a pencil, and wincing not at the pain, but that he has to. Divorce papers, a poke in the back with a pencil.
Oh, well
That
done.
is my hyben with a refrain.
That is
So,
well done. Wow, that would have
thank
been
you.
so funny if we both done hyphens with the refrain. I was
know.
like, if I'd had 30 minutes to write, I probably would have attempted that. But that was great. I really loved the
Yeah.
pace. Always fun to hear Tim Green read a poem fast.
well, written on the plane, too, in a little notebook. So that was our prompt poems for this week. Let's see what everybody else here has. And let's go first in line. We have Stephen Croft.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Stephen, good to see you.
Good to see you. Let me explain something about my refrain first, which includes older brothers. When I was young, in the period I'm writing about, a friend of mine had 6 older brothers, and once I hung around the house long enough that I was considered family, one of the older brothers tied me upside down to a tree limb in the backyard, which took some doing. My friend Aaron had to get the ladder to undo me. So that's my preface. This is Stray Kids of Fernandina Beach. Hunger, a small price for our endless summer, free of parents, chores, older brothers. The chrome glinting cars of island tourists swished by between us, 5 darkly tanned boys spanning both sides of Atlantic Avenue, barefoot in bathing suits. Shirtless, like crows scavenging for leftover bits of nourishment, we lift feet occasionally to extract pesky sand spurs, search verge grass for castaway bottles. We can return to Jiffy for a 5-cent deposit. We find the richest cache, 4 bottles, by the entrance to Fort Clinch State Park, a reputed burial place of Blackbeard's gold, somehow appropriate. My group waits to run across the hot, shimmering asphalt, which can pierce through calloused souls with kettle-hot heat, our arms full of bottles. 4 girls old enough to drive yell wildly and wave. I can't wave back. Down the strip, past the surf motel, the water slide, go-karts, we enter Jiffy like conquerors, holding enough bottles to buy 2 bags of potato chips. Heading under the main beach pavilion's corrugated metal roof, we divide the spoils on a concrete picnic table. Talk about that day we asked a lady grilling at one of the pavilion's battered steel grills if we could have one of her burgers, sizzling with seductive aroma. You boys hungry? Sure. She gave each of us one, saying, we just home folks from Callahan. After the chips disappear from the table, we go watch the go-karts, dreaming of $5 in shoes. A sign in red says, shoes required, that would let us race around the oval track. Driver's licenses not required. We drift to the nearest apartment complex with its fenced pool for residents only. We swim as the guests of Clint if questioned. A schoolmate resident gone to summer with his mother in another town. Later, as day fades, we'll collect our bikes from their stack behind Jiffy. I'll ride home, feet turning pedals, mouth already tasting dinner's leftovers. Hunger, a small price for our endless summer, free of parents, chores, older brothers.
Great details in that. Thanks so much for sharing that, Stephen.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was Stephen Croft with Stray Kids of Fernandina Beach. And Katie Dozier, our prompt poems editor, reminds me that we were supposed to be revealing the prompt poem of the month winner. I think let's just to make it clean. Let's do it at the end. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we should do it. We're going to heighten the suspense.
Heighten the suspense.
That's the whole plan. That was the whole reason.
Yep. It was just an act. That was my acting skills, having being flustered, not being able to log into the right account. So now that you know, you're in on the little secret. We'll reveal that right at the end. So let's go. And I also, though, too, I wanted to check to see if the person was here.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't sure if they were going to be able to join or not. And so far, well, we'll find out. Let's see. Keep the suspense up. Anyway, let's go to Carla Schwartz next.
Hi.
Hey, Carla.
Great to be here. What a great night of poems and interview.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I couldn't make it last Monday afternoon, but I have a poem that I think fits the prompt, and it's called Headbanger at One.
Ooh. I've been there with the kids. So okay, let's hear it.
Too much pain at one, not enough words. Too much pain at one, too few words. Too much pain at one. Was it all that shouting? Too much pain at one. Actions speak louder. Too much pain at one. Ow, ow, ow. Too much pain at one. Pow, pow, pow. Too much pain at one. What's one pain more? Too much pain at one. Head meets floor.
Vivid poem. Thanks for mentioning that. Headbanger at one. I was thinking at least nobody dropped you, Carla, because what I was thinking of was my daughter rolling off the bed, and then hopefully nothing broke, and so she's great.
Turned out fine.
She turned out fine. So
Good.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Carla. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, too much pain refrain. Yeah. So Carla remembered the refrain.
Yeah.
Let's see. Next we have Dick Westheimer.
Well, hello.
Hey,
Hi.
Dick.
Thank you so much for that interview. That was I detected, Tim, you being a little bit starstruck, which I've never seen before.
Well, he is. I mentioned this the last time, but when he was on earlier, but he's one of those first poets. Where I didn't realize I liked poetry all that much. I read a couple of his earlier books because one was assigned in class, got the other one at the library, and was like, wow, this poetry stuff is really interesting. And so when you talk to somebody like that, it's just a strange progression, of admiring somebody's writing and, falling in love with poetry because of them. And then you're just talking to them like it's a regular Zoom call. It's neat.
Well, one of the things I noticed is how much he trusts readers.
Mm-hmm.
He just leaps all over the place, and obviously because of his craft and stuff, he takes you along, but he just trusts you as a reader to make those leaps with him, which is really instructive for me.
Yeah, and that idea too, like he calls it a performance, the act of writing itself, and he's sort of performing for himself at the same time as everybody else, and so he has to entertain and trust himself, and then because he does that, it engages with other people. It's an interesting way to look at it.
It's terrific. Well, speaking of trusting, I didn't trust that I would get through this prompt. It was a double challenge, and partly because, well, you'll see in the poem that the pain from then doesn't resonate now. So
yeah, that's a good point.
Mm-hmm. Identify it as pain, and so for a while I was thinking I didn't have any pain. There's nothing here for me, and then figuring out what refrain. Anyway, it was a challenge. Mm-hmm. So we'll see if it worked, and it's another attempt at a Ivan. We'll see.
Another Hyman with a refrain. I thought I was original.
Well, you are original. I do not have the freight train reading rhythm in this poem that you had in.
Well, thanks.
Here, and the title's changed a little bit from what you have there, but here we go. Now I see what's kept in the box in the back of the barn. Drawn on the box, I see where big bully David and his buddies threw my book bag over the chain link fence. I see the badge Alex Z ripped from my safety patrol belt. I see tucked below all that the cackling mask of the boy who called me fag in gym class. I see it again and again being chosen last. And I see all these things wrapped in a moist towel that snapped against my bare skin in the locker room after swim lessons. Then I pry open the box and see fossilized artifacts from a museum of me. I turn them in my hand to try to feel how it felt to be that boy. I am like an archaeologist attempting to discover the pathos and passions of an ancient by studying shards and bones. All I see is covered in dust, and then beneath it all, I see a rolled up scrap from a scroll written in a hand that looks like mine. This is why it says, when you shine the brightest, you won't be able to see yourself at all. Gazing at the stars, an old man remembers.
Oh, that's great. Love the haiku at the end, Dick, which is always a sign of a good haibun, as we know. Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Thanks, Tim. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye. It's Dick Westheimer with, this version is What's Kept in the Box in the Back of the Barn. And, and, it reminds me, this whole thing so far, how similar childhood pains are, I mean, we all go through kind of a similar type of content. Let's see. Carolyn Codd is up next. Hi, Carolyn.
Hi.
Yeah, great to see you. How are you doing today?
Pretty well. When I saw the prompt, I decided I didn't even want to think about it because there's so much pain and trouble going on, and also I've been having pain in my arms and shoulders, so I just didn't want to think about pain. But Friday night, in the middle of the night, I woke up with some words and I jotted them down. And I had some things to do Saturday morning, but by the middle of the day, I wrote this from those words.
Oh, great.
So it's called Scared to Death. I was 5 years old, Mother's Day at church. They made me recite a poem. I froze. I was scared to death. Later on, Christmas time, again, they made me recite a poem. I struggled to remember the lines. I was scared to death. Finally, years later, another occasion, I wrote a little something. They asked me to read it. They seemed to like it, and I was no longer scared to death.
Oh, that's great. What a memory.
That's so sweet. And now you read poems almost every week.
That's true, you do.
That's just scary.
Yeah, it's definitely not. Thanks so much, Carolyn. It's always such a pleasure. Take care.
You too.
Yeah, that was Carolyn Codd with Scared to Death, and proof that you should not be scared to death to share your prompt poems on the prompt lines.
That is proof. I still sometimes get a little nervous, but don't tell anyone.
Well, let's go to Nate Jacob. He's shaking in his boots over here. Hey, Nate.
Nervous already.
Hey,
so, guys.
Yeah, how you doing this week?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We're great. Yeah.
My wife has given me a hard time every week when I show her my video of me because she's upset that I don't but you back how you're doing.
Well, but you should tell your wife that if everybody does that, then we just say the same thing over and over again. So it makes sense. It's the logical thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'll highlight this part. Thank you.
In fact, I try not to say how you doing. I say, what do I try to say instead? I'm like,
great,
good to see you. That's better. If I'm about to say that, I reverse.
And
pivot.
I kind of slap him.
Yeah. Because I don't want to force anybody to ask too. So that's it's a good point, etiquette, but yet in this context, unnecessary. But anyway.
Well, hey, and it was also nice with Bob's interview to find out that I'm not the only one who hates his poems after he writes them. Turns out I'm just like Bob. So the future looks bright. I went ahead and wrote about a childhood pain, though. Mm-hmm. It was hard. I didn't want to write a sad poem. So I thought about writing about the French word pain, which is bread. I did not. Did not. But I'll go ahead and read the one I did write. Father's Lullaby about the concept of place by way of eviction. These things happen all the time, son, to better people, more deserving too. But who picks up the pieces better? No one. No one dumps them into damp liquor boxes and moves on to more of the same like us. These things happen no matter what you do, no matter how your father or mother work, no matter the opinion of gods nor their plans too, no matter the weather or the weather not. It's not just us. It can't be just us. These things happen for a reason, son. And if you look inside, deeper, you may finally agree that maybe no one but you had to do with all the mess you endure. Shame isn't in poverty. It's in the blame. It's us. These things happen no matter what you do. Destiny or karma or some other higher law demand that justice be laid at your feet. It's you. Justice, in your case, may look to you too, like paying the price for another's malice. By the time you figure it all out, son, you may realize the dirty secret truth. Mercy is that these things happen all as one, in every direction and at every moment. Now sleep in the spindly arms of injustice.
Oh, great last line. I think we all sleep in the spindly arms of injustice a little too often.
Yeah, I love the no weather to weather. Now it's not in front of me. No matter the weather or the weather not. That's clever, Nate Jacobs.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, excellent poem.
Thanks for the great show.
Yeah, thanks, Nate.
Awesome. Thanks.
It was Nate Jacobs with Father's Lullaby about the concept of place by way of eviction. Very interesting poem. And so Marty Smith mentioned he doesn't want to read, so you're still here, but if you change your mind, leave another chat message. We'll go to Laura Berg instead next.
Okay, I'm embarrassed that I didn't do a refrain. But I got part of this.
Well, that's it. As long as it inspires a poem, that's all we
Yes.
care about. To be honest.
So we're in progress. So here we go. Memory poem. I admit I can be afraid to read great books, afraid I won't remember authors or plots. Just the sensibility, like a cirrus cloud's wisp of sphinx, or the scent of aubergines sparking on a grill, or professors' voices in the study deepening with sherry. What was the story? Why did it move me? I'm ashamed to be so porous. Raised in the shadow of those great trained minds of Eastern Europe that command, waggle, rove within the noble ovals of their skulls, delft blue eyes gazing down upon me, puzzled by my lightheadedness. What could have gone amiss after modeling for me over and over how to grip knowledge like a bench vise? Listen, I will turn this handle and milli by milli let the metal jaws relax. Unscrew my courage from its sticking point, being ever so careful so my brain doesn't drop, and gather up a great book I haven't yet or did and forgot, but won't let this deter me. Read, skip some pages, loop back, feel my way.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Laura. Another excellent poem. The childhood pains just keep coming up, and we address them though and fight through. Good. It's a memory poem by Laura Berg. Thanks for sharing that, Laura.
Thank you.
All right, and now, and let's see, who do we have next? Zachary Honeycutt is here. Does he have a prompt poem? We'll see. The mystery is out. Let's see, Zachary, do you have a prompt poem?
I do have a prompt poem. I have a very special prompt poem about my childhood doggie that passed away when I was
sorry
15.
to hear that.
Yeah. She was my best friend and the second character from my novel that I wrote a poem about that I'm going to be reading tonight. Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Haley is the yin to Trapezius's yang. She's the old wise woman, the old kind of like Master Yoda type dog that is in charge of the rest of the pack in the novel. And then in reality, she was my best friend. She would sleep by my bed every night, and she would patrol the house, and she would watch over the house. And sometimes she would even like tuck her head in the door crack by my room, or she would just like walk by my room and look in to see me, and then she would go on her patrol. And yeah, she was like a little human. She she didn't have arms, but she'd stick her head through the blinds and like use her head to open the blinds to look through the window, which I describe very vividly, like in one of the paragraphs in the first chapter of my book. But she's a great character. So whenever I write about Haley, like my poetry comes to life. So this is probably one of my favorite poems that I wrote about her, and it is a villanelle. Yes.
Well, let's hear it, Zach.
Respite for Zachary. Mourn her not so oft where she is lying. The soul is lighter than your weighted heart. A barking wind now at ease with sighing. Tight-lipped, ice sunk, see life's laws complying. For her, you thought the rules were set apart. Mourn her not so oft where she is lying. Your feelings thick as gusts until dying. She, a breeze that passed when you felt it start. A barking wind now at ease with sighing. You basked in the gaze she aired, not trying. An air of wisdom, her most human part. Mourn her not so oft where she is lying. You, the artist, drew her gentle smiling? No, she drew out that shading of your art. A barking wind now at ease with sighing. Leave that place like her soul left you crying. This dame, tail wagging, who roams on is smart. Mourn her not so oft where she is lying. A barking wind now at ease with sighing.
That's excellent, Zachary. I love a villanelle, and I knew that there'd be some chances of a good villanelle coming in. Excellent work, as always.
I like the barking wind a lot on that line. So definitely my favorite line.
Yeah, that's true. I was wondering about, Zach, do you meter your villanelles, or do you think you should be metered? Or do you just, is it your ear just metering it naturally?
This one, I wrote this one in college. I think that this one was by ear. I don't think I super planned this one, but sometimes I do. It just depends. If I feel like really focusing on the meter, I will. But yeah, I also write by ear. This one I think was by ear. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, very cool. Definitely it reminds me of my German Shepherd when we go on hikes. Always, if the kids are straggling or something, he comes around and like makes sure he finds them, and then gets behind. Then he runs to the front of the line, makes sure that everyone else is still there, kind of herding us along the trail. So,
he's the guardian of the pack.
Yep,
there.
For sure. Definitely, that's what dogs can be. Thanks for sharing that, Zachary.
Yeah. See you guys next time.
Yep. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Zachary Honeycutt with Respite for Zachary. Next we have Eva Christine. I believe Eva's been on before. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, great to see you.
Yeah, I decided to join again. It's really fun.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. So
yeah, it's intimidating, but it's fun.
Oh, it shouldn't be. We're just all friends hanging out, and you can watch me mess up like in real time and prove that it doesn't.
Yay! I'm not alone.
So I have this poem here, "When I Could Not Fly." That's the one.
Yes,
right? Mm-hmm.
I actually did try to fly.
You did?
So it was really painful when I found out you could not fly. So I wrote "When I Could Not Fly" by Eva Christine. No one was around me, so I thought it would be the perfect timing to try. I left the door behind me. I ran to the very top of the hill, got my shoes ready, and I decided to fly. 1, 2, 3. No one beside me. I grab a hold of the branch. It broke and slid all the way down the hill, thinking that something more than the ground was going to catch me. I ran up the hill to try again and again. Why doesn't this work? I asked myself to begin. Why can't I get going? Why can't I fly? I want to leave. I need to leave. This is not who I'm meant to be anymore, nor who I want to be. Let's try again on the count of 3.
Oh, that's great. Love that ending.
Yeah, me too. Makes me want to
Thank
try
you.
it.
Ending with some hope. Maybe we
Yeah,
can all go out, blaze of
Careful
glory.
what tree you hold. The birch tree is probably the best one to get a hold of.
Good idea.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. Love that bending of birches poem.
Yeah.
Too, with frost hanging on that, swinging. Yeah, excellent childhood memories. Thanks for sharing that, Eva.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
That was Eva Christine with her poem, When I Could Not Fly. Next up, we have Paul Mitchell Bernstein. Hey, Paul, good to see you.
Good to see you guys too. Thank you, as always, for hosting this. Thanks for the interview. Let me pull up the piece. Yeah, it's a real short piece. I wrote it real quick. And like Katie was saying, not quick, and I didn't know whether or not I should share it and it's in an odd style that I sometimes write in, where I sort of separate my inner dialogue into a literary character, and I do that mostly when I'm doing sort of autobiographical stuff or stuff from my childhood. Anyway, so I submitted this to Rattle, and I think I wrote in the comment this poem is about bullying, regret, and the voices in my head. It's called Sperm Stain's Lament. A tall, slack-jawed boy with curly black hair and a stupid smile, turning screws on Joe, winding him up. He squeezes his neck, slaps his back. What's up, Sperm Stain? Making fun of his name. What's up? Squeezing his shoulder, slapping his back, his stupid laugh, his dog shit brain. Punch him in his fucking gut, turning screws on Joe. Sperm Stain, Sperm Stain.
Excellent. Really interesting refrain there, Paul. And there's so many experiences that are really common, that we all feel and share, like that bullying thing.
Yeah.
Hopefully these days at school, there's less of that, but there was a lot when I was a kid. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really creative to use an antagonistic name used on you as the refrain in the poem. That's very creative.
That is.
I talk about taking ownership of that now. Now you have, turned that on its head from anybody saying that.
Do I want to put that out there to the world? Like, fuck it, why not?
Yeah. The answer should always be yes, I've realized so.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for sharing that, Paul. Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Thanks, Tim.
Yep. That was Paul Mitchell Bernstein with Sperm Stain's Lament. Andrew Trudinick is up next.
Hi, guys.
Hey,
How
Andrew,
are you?
great to see you. Yeah.
I've got an actual memory from school days. It was set in 1969 when I was in the 6th grade, and I knew this guy in the early 70s as well, kind of. And yeah, it's just a one-off painful memory of bullying, and yet the memory of it stuck with me. And so I don't know if I feel it in a way, but I guess I do. You know what I mean? It's one
I definitely know. Yeah, it's still there. Wanting revenge too.
This is actually a true story. This is actually what happened, and the details are kind of true too. So, well, as I remember them anyway. A school memory. Robert hit me. One afternoon after school in 1969, we were in 6th grade. I wonder why. Tall, wiry, glasses. He took off my glasses first. He was from a long way away, 3,000 kilometers from our boarding school. I wondered why. He'd not long arrived, a breaking home, his parents plantation owners. He had one of the then new small transistor radios in the 6th grade. He played the tremolos on his new record player in the 9th. And he had serious stereo gear by the 12th. We didn't speak much in those 7 years. But at the 20th school reunion, he said to me that I hadn't aged a bit. I wondered why about that too. And a decade before that reunion, I'd met a young man who lived in his hometown in the 1970s, the same hometown. I wondered why had he heard of the family? And my friend said, yes, pleasure seekers. I saw recently from a photo of him with his adult daughter that he's back there now. I wondered why just the two of them. Robert hit me one afternoon after school in 6th grade. I wonder why.
Yes, school memory.
Yeah. It's a story of bullying, and it's a story of a guy that I had almost nothing to do with after that, except we were in the same year at school. And so we knew each other, but didn't really have any contact. But I realized when I'd actually looked up where he is now that I was interested enough to find out. And you think, gosh, so maybe I haven't forgotten,
Yeah, for sure.
I haven't forgotten those who wronged me in my youth.
Definitely.
I'm glad I can Google them.
For me, there's a guy.
I anonymized it a bit, but it was his actual name. So.
Yeah, well, nothing wrong with using real names. I don't know how it is in Australia, but here, if it's true, it's not libel. So.
That's right. The truth defense.
Yeah, the truth is a defense. For me, the same story was Chris Norton. That's his name. Chris, if you're watching. And I thought, sometime when I grow up, I'm going to punch him back. We were in Cub Scouts in the basement. He was just like, hey, Tim. I turned around. He punched me in the stomach, knocked the wind out of me. Yeah. And so I looked him up later because my class reunion was coming up, like the 20th or something. And he is this like 6'5", like 300 pounds of muscle with like tattoos everywhere. And I decided not to punch him at the class reunion. So.
Because violence is not the answer, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. That's why.
Yep. So Chris, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Well, that's right. Violence is not the answer.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Andrew. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the time, and thanks for the great guest with Bob Hicok. It was really good. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Glad you enjoyed it, Andrew. Thanks.
Bye.
Yeah, that was Andrew Tredinik with A School Memory. Let's see. We have Bishwajit Mishra up next. Just a couple more people on the open lines. Prompt lines. Oh, I did it again. Bishwajit, hey, how you doing?
Hey, Tim and Katie.
Hey,
hi.
Yeah, great to see you.
Good to see you guys. We timed it at the same time. Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, I was looking forward to that interview with Bob Hicok. I mean, I didn't know his name until you told in one of the episodes about the fighting poems, termination poems. So and it got canceled last time. So it was really very, very interesting interview.
Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, I should
the
say.
way more than his poems, the matters he talked about, the way so easily he talked about, it was brilliant.
Yeah, great description of his process.
Yeah.
It was really fascinating to hear. And that's what I always wondered about too. And I'm glad he could come back. He was originally scheduled for September. I didn't even mention, but then he had to, couldn't make it, but then reschedule it. Really nice of him.
And he makes it sound so easy and simple, the way he talks. Right?
Just sit down and write some stuff, Bishop. It's no problem.
Okay. So, like Dick, I almost didn't feel like there was and everybody has pain, but I couldn't think of something which could be interesting to others. And it just came.
Well, there you go.
Then I didn't want to send it because I don't like that subject anyway, but I'm like hooked, drugged to the process. Once you write, you have to go through the whole thing, right? So I submitted it.
Yeah, I have it right here.
The Killing Without Punishment. It was the first ever killing, and with a blunt knife, performed without punishment. A nice Sunday morning was the proselyte's first kill. a prerequisite, not punishment. It was just a poor chicken, one of the many that get killed. Always a play without punishment. That's what even an acolyte is expected to do, to make a place. So why be pushed for punishment? I turn vegetarian and wipe out violence, resetting the drive to gain peace over punishment. Recalling that gory picnic of a winter holiday by a river. Maybe penance is my punishment.
Oh, that's great. I love the use of the refrain there, Bishop. It's sort of a hybrid between a guzzle and a haiku, kind of, the way it works. It's really nice. I like the form.
I slaughtered a chicken, the only one in my life, with a blunt knife. I had never done that, just to show off.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know how it came. I was doing my yoga. I decided I'm not going to write. I was doing my yoga and I was trying to meditate, and suddenly this thing crops up. I said, no, I'm not writing. I don't. And then it pained me so much. I almost cried.
Oh, wow.
About how painful it would have been to the bird. I was just trying to kill it like that.
Yeah.
And, so here, you got it.
I'm glad you decided to write it.
Yeah, those are the kind of things that have to come out from that subconscious. Yeah. It's true.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bishop. Yeah, I appreciate it. That was Bishop Mishra, sorry, with The Killing Without Punishment. And now let's go to Lucy Chow. Hey, Lucy, are you there? Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing tonight?
Or today? I'm doing very great.
Great. So what do you have for us?
Actually, last week's Rattlecast prompted me to write a fairly longer poem than I usually write. So I just sent an excerpt, which is the writing into the pain part of the poem.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. What's it called, Lucy?
I just sent in the subject line Lucy's poem, I think, because it doesn't have a title yet.
Okay, Lucy.
Have you got it?
I don't see it. I think I had one from last week, from the November 20th, but that's not it. Let me check the... Well, we'll just have to listen, Lucy, I think. I can't see it here, but we'll just sit back and listen.
Okay, so I think I'll just read it.
Okay, sure.
Were it not for the book with a rabbit on the cover standing on a woman's plate, threatened with a knife and fork, were it not for an indignation implanted by day after day at school dodging the bullies' bludgeons of fists, were it not for awakening in the 3rd grade to how much mourning the earth is constantly ineluctably in, because humans are proud of riding the evolutionary rocket from puny prey in the jungle to arch predator of the world. Were it not for the half-hellish, half-angelic spark that sets her denouncing man and his crimes, smashing the great chain of being, saving all so-called lower beasts by swearing never to eat them again, and calling on every fellow human with the smallest spark of sense to do the same. But most fatally, a paranoid preteen's predilection to amp up the riz of everything by keeping it secret, especially from parents, as a verboten, even though their minds are open, if only hers will be less closed. If she didn't turn the project of emancipating all life farmed by her heinous species into a spy game, if only she didn't start by practicing and perfecting the prestidigitation of hiding rashers and fried eggs wrapped in tissues up her sleeves, of decanting the compulsory glasses of milk into a bottle she then takes outside to pour into cracked saucers for cats, of stuffing all her pockets with blood-stained foodstuffs, then purging her person clean by flushing the greasy nuggets of atrocity down the toilet or flicking out of the window. If only she didn't embargo candor itself. Both mom and dad martinets of meals who would let their daughters skip school rather than skip vital items on the established menu, and spared herself the martyrdom, self-contrived, self-crowned, of being found out, interrogated, and reduced to teary hysteria by those who love her the most, whom she deems untrustworthy, no longer trusting their definitions of ethically correct food, morally meaningful life forms, of finally, on a momentous, tumultuous afternoon that tilts imperceptibly, inexorably into evening rush hour, the night outside their upended, boiling household, confessing what she has prided herself on for years, as if it were shameful. Their 13-year-old daughter is an incorrigible trasher of food, because to her that is not food, because hateful, not eatable, because humans are incorrigible in their habit of making murder delectable, unconscionable.
Well, very interesting. Thanks so much for sharing that, Lucy.
And when some miracle makes her two dietary despots approve veganism, the only way to be righteous in this world of one animal sinning against all else, the only way of eating decently, peace still won't resume, because 4 flourishing years of tofu, potatoes, tomatoes, mushrooms, broccoli, and rice vanished into a high school sophomore's furtive, undefinable problem with eating. She was blooming into a full-blown damsel, fuller of flesh than her fancy, thus her onslaught of retreat from food, again without telling anybody. So it's just the first part of the poem, and I'm sorry the email didn't come to you, so yeah.
Oh, no problem, Lucy. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. And how long is the poem, and where does it go?
I think it's more than 200 lines, approximately 1,000 words, I think.
Oh, wow. Yeah, well, thanks so much for sharing it. It's a pleasure as always. So many details to sink into.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Yep, that was Lucy Chow with a prompt poem. And let's go really quickly. Nivita Karthik sent one. Couldn't make it because of work today, and asked us to read this. She says, I've written a prompt poem on a refrain about a childhood pain. I think the most painful part of childhood is not recognizing and fully embracing the joys of childhood. That's a good point. Yeah. And we really don't. Like, looking back, there's I wish I appreciated that feel. Yeah, excellent point, Nivi. This is something we realize only as adults. And so this, according to me, has to be the most painful part of childhood. So I wrote a poem about this. This is a short poem. Why did we forget to be children? Let me go to this screen. And here we go. This is Nivedita's poem. Why did we forget to be children? Why did we never delight in childhood when we were children? Why did we rush through days like fleeting whispers yearning to grow up? Why did we trade laughter for the weight of time's relentless march? Why did we not collect pebbles of happiness and string them into a necklace of memories? Why did we not dance with wonder and linger a little longer on the playground of innocence? Why, oh why, did we not savor childhood when we were children? Yeah, that's excellent. Thanks so much for sharing that. It'd be a great point about childhood, and we miss so much because we don't know to appreciate it yet.
Yeah.
John Arthur is here. He just joined the room, and I think, hey, John, it's a poem we've published in the past, a while ago, I believe. It's a different John Arthur. So you're not Canadian.
No, you haven't published me, but you're going to in number 84, I believe.
Well, okay. Well, there's that. Oh, so that's funny. So I thought you were the same John Arthur, but it's good to meet you. So where are you calling from?
New Jersey.
And what's the poem that's going to be in?
It was called Wayfair.
Yeah, that's a great poem. Yeah, Katie liked it, pulled it out of the old. That's one thing that we should say too.
Yeah,
we have already published, I think, or accepted for a publication, 5 poems from the Prompt Lines submission. So we've published the 4 winners now, but another 5 additional poems, including yours, John. Thanks so much.
Which I loved.
Well, thank you. No, it's awesome. I've been reading for a long time, and I'm pretty excited about it. So
excellent. Well, what do you have to share with us tonight?
I just sent you something. Sorry for being late. I was putting a 2-month-old to bed. So
good for you. Fighting the good fight there.
Excellent. Yeah, for sure. So I have it up here, Louisville Slugger. So I can sense this one coming on too. Have a little experience with the old Slugger, but let's see. Okay, go ahead. Right. Yeah, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
One sec, let me just... All right. You were Dad's old bat, a hand-me-down, gift-wrapped, and it was you I held when I broke the local home run record with a cold metal kiss. When I was done with you, he took you back, kept you beside his bed in case of intruders. Later, drunk, years after, my shoulders had grown broad enough to hurt him. I swung first and he picked you up, then swung you back. I felt your cold metal kiss for the first time in years.
That's a rough poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, John.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Really nice to get to see you.
Yeah, thanks. I'll keep reading, and I've been listening to this podcast during my commute for like 6 months straight because I drive so much in New Jersey. So yeah.
Well, that's great. So glad you can, and thanks for writing that poem and the Wayfarer one, which is another excellent, similar style as far as the length and the brevity, which is what we loved about it. Yeah, thanks for sharing both.
Thanks.
All right, take care. That was John Arthur with Louisville Slugger. Yeah. All right, and now let's see. We're going to read one more poem. We have one more prompt poem. Ted Guevara can't join us, so we'd love to share his poems. And he's got an image here, which is interesting. This is a photograph. Let me fix this. This is a girl laying down next to some chalk figures of a mom and dad, or so maybe a grandma and grandpa. Yeah. And here's Ted's poem, Down. Mommy warm in my closed eyes. Mommy breathing in my closed eyes. Mommy voices in my closed eyes. Mommy beautiful in my closed eyes. I hug her same. I can't. I hug her the same. I can't breathe. I'm in the crib under my pillows. In the crib under many pillows. The crib under many pillows. I am far. I can't breathe. A really moving poem there, and in a very abstract way. Usually we say concrete images are so important, but that works really well in a sort of abstract, distanced way because of the refrain, I guess, or the multiple refrains.
And because it speaks to how a child's trying to process the world, which is not as concretely as adults do.
Exactly. Yeah, excellent point. Thanks for sharing that, Ted. Really interesting poem. It was Down by Ted Bernal Guevara. And now is the time for the big reveal. And so what did you say? So who was the winner of this year's prompt poem, or with this month's prompt poem of the month?
First, I think we should say that maybe this was the more appropriate time to announce the winner, because the winner this month is someone who has been sending poems with this pseudonym for a long time to the Rattlecast. Before it was the prompt lines, when it was the open lines, sending a lot of poems that I've liked before. So that's definitely the first thing. And then secondly, this was taken from the prompt that was inspired by Jamaica Baldwin. So it's a sonnet that has a title that has 2 blanks in it. So now we should just read the title probably and say it. I'm not good at drawing this out. Okay.
So here is the poem that was this week's prompt poem of the month. The End of Hurt is Not Healing by J.B. Penname. And we've had a lot of fun over the years trying to figure out who J.B. Penname actually is.
And we still don't know.
We still don't know. We thought maybe J.B. would show up and reveal herself or himself on the Zoom. But no, right from the start, J.B. has had great poems that they've sent us. And this is no exception. It's an American sonnet based on or spun off of Jamaica Baldwin's. And I'll just go ahead and read it. Yeah. Oh, you want to read it?
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
want to read it.
Okay, go ahead.
The End of Hurt is Not Healing, after Jamaica Baldwin. Whose bright idea was it to start tearing out pages of poetry and wadding them up to plug our wounds? The poems I like don't even come when you call them. As though they've forgotten their masters, lost the sound of their own names. They bear no antiseptics, cannot cauterize you clean, but the way they lick themselves is still good for a laugh. Is that what I aspire to? 5 years ago, I nicked my finger slicing a carrot. 5 years, and I can't even watch my father carve a turkey without getting secondhand "please don't lose your goddamn fingers" syndrome. But sure, when he's done, I can sit at the counter. In the quiet of the kitchen, I can eat the turkey. Man, what a turkey.
Yeah, so great. I love so many lines in there. But the best line, I think, is the poems I like don't even come when you call them.
It's so great. It's also kind of the perfect poem to end this particular episode, because we have the discussion of childhood hurt and how that is still an active thing. And that's what so much of this poem is about, I think, here too.
Yeah, for sure. And the play on hurt too, the multiple ways hurt operates in the poem is really interesting. A really good one by JB, who has had many good poems.
Many good poems.
Yeah,
and I think it's a great way to illustrate how humor can allow us to get in deeper and dig in deeper into painful things sometimes. So it was great. There were a lot of really amazing poems this month. I have to say, it's not easy when I whittle it down. Woo.
Yeah, there's some tough decisions. Maybe some extra we'll publish too, though. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe. So it's been really fun getting to nominate some for more publication too, and I'm glad that some have been chosen, like Wayfair when we talked to John Arthur, which is cool because I love that poem. So.
Yeah, that's a great poem too, and everybody can look forward to it in issue number 84, which is June 2024, which sounds like a space age number, but that's only 6 months away. So now let's go. Let's say next week's prompt is going to be this right here. Can you read it? You want to read it?
Do you want to read it? Because this is your prompt this
That's
week.
true.
You came up with this prompt.
You don't have to acknowledge that. Yeah.
I came up with one, and then Tim came up with his, and it was better. So I conceded, and we had this awesome prompt, which I'm looking forward to.
Well, anyway, this is a prompt. This is a technique that Bob uses a lot. You notice Brendan Constantine is one, and then his episode he talks a lot about this, about looking at things from a different perspective. But the prompt is this: to use the Bob technique. Write a poem that begins with an idiomatic expression that you take literally or incorrectly, and then see where it goes.
I'm excited to write this one. It was good. It was the zinger. You knew it was better than mine. It's true.
That's all right. Well, yours was great too.
Oh, thank you.
But yeah, so just take any kind of expression that you sort of lost the sense of what it originally meant. Like it's raining cats and dogs or whatever like that. And then make it, take it literally or incorrectly, like misinterpret it.
I think this one's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited.
Yeah, I think so too. And I was just thinking after the childhood pain one, it'd be nice to have something that's more fun and playful.
Yeah.
So that is the prompt for this week. And let's do the Sciku really quickly. And the Sciku is interesting. I almost brought it up during the show because it really it would have been a good segue to this science story. And the story is this. Which is from the University of Duke, or I guess Duke University, as the uninitiated call it. So this is right here. Brittle stars. Let me get small enough so you can read it. There we go. Brittle stars can learn just fine even without a brain. So these special starfish called these brittle stars don't have any kind of central nervous system. There's no central housing in the middle of it that coordinates. Each limb is independent. And yet these brittle stars they found can be classically conditioned like Pavlov's dog. Whoa. So what the scientists did is they put them in tanks, of course, and then dimmed the lights right before it was feeding time. Oh. So they dimmed the lights, fed them. With a control group, they sort of randomly dimmed the lights and fed them, so there was no distinction. And then they started dimming the lights and not feeding them, and the starfish still came out. Ooh. Expecting food, waiting for their dinner, just like Sprinkles back there. And even though they don't have a brain, they somehow managed to be conditioned like this. Even, I think, as much as 30 days later, they still, if you dim the lights, they remembered that dimmer lights meant food. Whoa. And come down without a brain. So how is that even possible? But it reminded me of Bob Hicok sitting down every day. Like my subconscious comes out. This is the time the lights have started to not dim, but raise. Right. And the dawn is coming, the sun's coming up, and the poem comes up with the sun. And somehow, maybe like the part of his little pinky that actually makes poems, that secret creativity part, realizes that it's day, and then
it's time. Yeah.
Yeah. So there we go. So that is the story that led to this little haiku, and the haiku is this: brittle stars, so much to learn and forget. Brittle stars, so much to learn and forget. That is your Sciku for the week, and that is the show for the week. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Always a pleasure. Really wonderful talking to Bob. Doing these prompt lines with Katie is always a special treat, too, getting to be in the same place.
I know, it's been too long. It wasn't supposed to be that long, but we're in the same room now, so that's the important thing.
That's true. Yeah, it's been about a month almost since we were in the same room doing it, but it's great to do that. So thanks everybody once again for being here. Hope you enjoyed it. Now, next week's guest in the Rattlecast is going to be Greg Kosmicki. Now, Greg is another poet we've published a lot in Rattle. I don't know who's published more often in Rattle, Bob Hicok or Greg Kosmicki. He's one of those people that we've gotten a bunch of poems from. He was the longtime editor of which press is it? What's it called? I can't remember. There's a press in Nebraska that he was a longtime editor of. It's a great press. They publish a lot of great books. He retired from that, teaching gig and doing the press, moved to San Diego, came out with another book, We Eat the Earth, which is his next book coming up, and that's Greg Kosmicki. Rattlecast number 223, Monday, December 11th. The regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, and your prompts, which are going to be write a poem that begins with an idiomatic expression that you take literally or incorrectly and see where it goes. That'll be the Rattlecast 223. Hope to see you then. Hope you have a great week in the meantime, and I'll talk to you later. Good night.
Have a good night, everybody. Bye.